This is In the Loop. I'm Christian Bryant. Somewhere out in the multiverse, there are probably other versions of me. Maybe there's a taller version of me. Maybe there's a more handsome, well-dressed version of me in a suit and tie. Lucky for you, you get the funny one who hosts a nightly news show that has deep dives and a little bit of panache. All right, folks, we're going to do something a little different today. Let's take a quick break from talking about the pressing issues of our time. COVID, the supply chain, Wordle. Today, we're bringing you a new segment dedicated to deep dives and surprising stories from the world of pop culture. We're searching for answers to questions about movies, TV, music, and more. You know, the silliest little questions we've all Googled at least once in our lives. But they've got the answers you wouldn't expect, and some M. Night Shyamalan level twists. No question is too small for this segment we're calling Pop Quiz. And of course, what segment on pop culture is complete without Newsy's very own entertainment correspondent and friend of ITL, Casey Mendoza. Casey, what's going on?
Hey, CV. I am very excited to chat about an incredibly nerdy topic with you.
Isn't this what we do outside of taping already?
Yes, this is what we do for fun.
Let's dive into it then. Break it down for me.
I have got the very first question we're diving into today. Christian, why is everything CGI? That question may seem like an obvious one if you've probably already noticed how many movies and shows these days are filled with computer-generated images, both good and bad. But the answer to the question actually reveals something kind of deep and dark about the movie industry. And I'm not talking about Tom Hooper's 2019 Cats. We looked into what's really going on here, and it took us all over the place. From a controversial Oscar speech, to VFX studios moving to the other side of the world, to taxes, weirdly enough. Are you ready?
As ready as I can be. Please tell me.
To start, I need to put in perspective, how massive the industry for visual effects, or VFX, is today. Over the past couple of decades, VFX budgets have ballooned, spurred by groundbreaking mega hits in the early 2000s, like the Matrix trilogy. The first film, released in 1999, had a budget of $63 million. Since then, the top 5 biggest movie budgets have all been for VFX-heavy movies, ranging from a staggering $300 to $380 million. And to date, programming schedules are more packed than ever, thanks to all of these different cinematic universes and streaming platforms. The demand for VFX across film and TV is higher than ever, especially as the pandemic has driven more productions to turn virtual. VFX, first and foremost, saves a lot of money on production.
The amount of money it takes to fly to a location, to build sets, physically build sets, it just gets expensive. And also just coordinating all of the travel and, moving lots of people around and actors and film crew and all of that stuff.
Okay, so that seems like a simple enough explanation for why it's so popular, right? But there's actually a lot more going on behind the scenes. To explain, I need to take you back to this Oscar acceptance speech by the VFX supervisor on the movie Life of Pi.
Finally, I want to thank all the artists who worked on this film for over a year, including Rhythm and Hughes. Sadly, Rhythm and Hughes is suffering severe financial difficulties right now. I urge you all to remember.
Oh no!
They played him out. They cut
Dissonance.
him off. The team just won the Oscar for Best Visual Effects. And the man speaking, Brian Westenhofer, is from the production company called Rhythm and Hughes, which was actually in bankruptcy at that very moment.
What a weird bit of dissonance. This guy, they're celebrating their win, but he's also talking about how Rhythm and Hughes was suffering.
And Rhythm and Hues would shut its doors the year after. And it was far from the only high-profile one. Digital Domain, the company James Cameron helped start in the 90s, went bankrupt in 2012 and was bought by two companies, one in China and one in India, and is now owned by a company in Hong Kong. The VFX shop, MPC, which was behind the photorealistic CGI in the remake of The Lion King, closed down just a few months after the movie premiered in the summer of 2019. France-based VFX giant Technicolor SA filed for bankruptcy in the summer of 2020, citing the pandemic, though it had long faced financial difficulties. So suddenly this doesn't make sense. VFX is in more demand than ever. It's a huge money saver, and yet VFX companies are struggling to make a profit. Are you with me so far?
I am understanding that there is something amiss here.
Well, to explain that, we need to look at how this intense competition and demand has actually driven rates down. Because the space is so competitive, VFX companies usually bid low to make sure they get big projects. That can lead to companies barely breaking even, and if overtime and extra expenses pile up, which they do on massive film projects, that leads to massive financial losses. Prices also drop thanks to countries offering competitive tax incentives to attract production. So artists have left California and moved to new hubs in Canada or the UK, and business is booming across Australia, China, and regions with cheaper labor like India and Southeast Asia.
It's obviously more competitive, on the global scale, just because there's so many talented artists out there.
A place like Canada, then you'll get significant incentives, which will bring this rate even much lower by 30–40%. So it is extremely competitive. And then you bring India into the mix, maybe more on the commodity side. This is why we see a lot of studios getting in trouble super quickly.
Unions and guilds in entertainment, including the ones for animators and film editors, typically protect against these types of pricing issues. But visual effects is one of the rare fields in filmmaking without a union. Back in 2014, there was an attempt at creating a VFX trade association to lobby the government for help. They wanted help to counter the impact of foreign subsidies and keep artists from frequently having to move to keep steady work. But within 2 years, the group ran out of money to pay for legal funds. And it's only gotten harder to organize artists as the work spreads around the globe.
And so that kind of remote environment makes organizing more difficult for, a union that's been around for 125 years.
It's actually tough to say how much has changed for the working conditions of artists. On the one hand, it is clear that there is a skyrocketing demand for VFX, which can be an important thing for companies that need to stay busy in order to survive.
The issue when you have a large organization is once you're busy, life is good. Is if you have a hole in your schedule of 2 months and you have 400 people on your payroll doing nothing, that's when you can lose your shirt, really.
But on the other hand, the rapid pace and commoditization of VFX work have some insiders saying the work itself is changing.
When I first started, every quality was so important, and every pixel and making it as photoreal as possible. And I get worried that the next generation, because they didn't grow up watching movies shot on film, that hey, maybe it's good enough. And then it just sort of affects all of this artistry that we've, that's why we got into this business to begin with.
Well, you weren't kidding when you said we were gonna get nerdy.
Yeah, and before I go, we've been talking about how ubiquitous VFX is, but one thing I didn't mention is how much VFX work is what's known as invisible visual effects. In other words, not big explosions or everything, Spider-Man swinging between buildings. I've got some shots for you with CGI in them, and you've got to tell me what's the fake part. Do you think you can do that?
I think I can do that, and I know how people love a quiz, especially when I do poorly on them.
You are essentially telling me What is CGI in this little snippet?
There is an astronaut moving through what looks to be a space station. I'm looking at it, and something about the astronaut just doesn't quite seem real. Is the astronaut VFX?
He is. The astronaut in that scene is entirely made of VFX, which is really fascinating because this movie is from 2000.
Well, it's really good VFX, but there's something, it's kind of like the visual sort of uncanny valley where it looks just off enough to where, you know, it's, I don't think that's a human, but it looks really good. It's way better than I, you know, could ever do in my lifetime.
That's a very good strategy, so keep that mindset.
Okay. So I'm looking at the second image. This is a clip from, if I'm not mistaken, Spider-Man 2. I'm looking at this, and is any of this real? I feel like all of this is VFX. Is all of it VFX?
It is all VFX, including probably the most uncanny valley aspect. Alfred Molina's face was completely created with computer graphics. So that is not actually Doc Ock, or rather it is VFX Doc Ock completely.
It looks great, but he just looks kind of like a doll. He almost reminds me of Stewie from Mad TV. This is Jeremy Renner, and he is in what looks like a kitchen. I remember reading something about Jeremy Renner in a movie, and I don't know if this is the one, where his arms were VFX because he had broken both of his arms during the filming. So I'm looking at this, just gonna guess here. Are his arms VFX?
You got that correct, and you also took my fun tidbit away from me. That was gonna be my fun fact, but no, you got it and explained it. Yes, Jeremy Renner's arms were broken during the filming of that movie. So in reality, he had a cast, and so they covered that up.
This is from the Eternals. You have Angelina Jolie in the foreground, Lord Ridloff in the background. I'm gonna say some of their costumes and everything in the background, VFX. How close am I?
You were fairly close. Actually, all of Angelina Jolie's costume, she plays Thena in the movie, is completely CGI. That's because she was, wearing an Eternals costume while she was filming, but they changed the costume during post-production, which is why the costume you're seeing her wear in that photo is completely computer generated.
That's pretty good. I have what, maybe 4 points total here.
We'll say
maybe
you
three
got
and a half.
4 points.
I wasn't 4. Okay, we'll say 4. I learned a good bit about invisible VFX and the VFX industry as well. Casey Mendoza, thank you so much for the inaugural installation of
Pop quiz.